Since the New York Mets are basically done this season, it's time for a rebrand. Welcome to Locked On Binghamton Rumble Ponies.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Rumble Ponies fans. You're listening to Locked On Rumble Ponies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. Also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, for those of you who've been listening to the show for a while, you know Friday is generally about a farm report. We dive into some stories in the Mets farm system, but throughout the remainder of this year, there's one team in particular, the Mets farm system, that I want to spend some time on, and that is the Binghamton Rumble Ponies, the Mets AA affiliate. So when I got this hat on, which is, of course, last year's Binghamton Rumble Ponies hat, I think they might have changed it up this year. But when I got this hat on, we're talking Rumble Ponies, and we're going to cover them like it is the big league team. And this team is actually a lot more exciting right now than the big league club. They're in a playoff race. Okay, it's second half standings time. That's the way they do it in the minor leagues, split season. So you're looking at a second half record when it comes to the standings right now. And here's a Binghamton team that's been pretty hot in August. They're 6-3 this month. They finished July with a 12-14 record. They also had a series for their first half that was at the end of June. So they lost that first series. Then they go into July. They end up 12-14 on the season by the end of July, but they won 6 of their last 7 games to close out that month. And then August, they're hot, and you wonder why? Maybe it's partially because of the big trade deadline acquisitions. In minor league baseball, a lot of times trade deadline, you think about the prospect who could be sent out. But when the major league club fails, big prospects come in. And while the New York Mets lost Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer, the Binghamton Rumble Ponies gained a new starting center fielder, a new starting shortstop. Can you imagine that? Being in a playoff race, and all of a sudden you get some top flight talent at the two most premium positions. That's what the Rumble Ponies got when Drew Gilbert walked in. He's playing center field, and at shortstop, you got Luis Angel Acuna, and they're playing for something. You also have Jeremiah Jackson, who came over in the Dominic Leone trade, a guy who maybe long-term profiles as utility infielder type. We've seen him get some games at second, some games at third. Billy Epler did draft Jeremiah Jackson in the second round, I believe, back in 2018. So he obviously likes his game. Doesn't bring the most power, but does have just an all-around game. So you have another guy who's a top 30 prospect probably now in the Met system who's part of this team. And there's other guys, JT Schwartz is having a big season as a cleanup hitter. There's a lot of interesting pieces. Today, we're going to focus a little bit more on the pitching because I think the most exciting part about this team right now is their starting rotation and the race that they're in. Because, hey, if you have the MLB.TV subscription, you can watch minor league baseball. So you paid all this money to watch the Mets in a playoff chase. How about you take that investment and you look at the Eastern League and you watch a AA team with the stars that will be on the big league club in a couple years and see how they can compete for a playoff spot. Coming into play today, the Binghamton Rumble Ponies were tied with the Somerset Patriots, which is the Yankees AA affiliate, in the Eastern League standings for the second half. Now, the Patriots were 42-26 in the first half, so they have the best overall record on the season. The Rumble Ponies, they were 35-34. Not quite as good, but the Rumble Ponies took the first 2 games of this 6-game set. It is hard to say Rumble Ponies this much. I liked the bit coming into the show. I thought it'd be fun, but man, maybe we just have to stick with Binghamton because Rumble Ponies is just ridiculous. I digress. It's funny though, because I did a lot of research today and it's the Mets day off. So I'm thinking, all right, well, usually this is a day where I can record a little bit early. I don't have to stay up late, get a podcast out there. I'm like, wait a minute. It's going to be Locked On Binghamton today. Guess I can't go to bed early. I got to see what happens with this game. And I was really excited because Tyler Stewart was on the mound, and Tyler Stewart prior to tonight was leading all of minor league baseball in ERA for the season. He was exceptional in Brooklyn, first 4 starts in Double-A, really strong as well. You know what happens when I tune in to the Rumble Ponies? Well, Tyler Stewart gives up 7 runs. 5 of them were earned, but still 7 runs. I believe the error was on Jeremiah Jackson, funny enough, if I'm not mistaken. That allowed 2 of the runs to score in the first. He didn't get out of the second inning. He didn't even record an out in the second inning. He just gave up a bunch of runs. And that ERA in Double-A shot all the way up to 3.86. Not a great start for him. And the Rumble Ponies lost 14-0. With that said, we're still talking about a team that has the 2 best prospects in the Mets farm system right now, in Gilbert and Acuna, the guys they just acquired at the deadline, who are playing on this roster. And this rotation is something I want to spend the rest of the show on, because you got 4 prospects that are probably part of the top 5 pitching prospects in the Mets system right now as presently constructed. Dominic Hamill, Blade Tidwell, Tyler Stewart, and Christian Scott. Those 4 guys all have a chance to factor into the Mets rotation pretty heavily. Maybe not 2024, though any of them could theoretically get up there by then. And then in 2025, there's a chance that all of these guys could be part of the Mets pitching staff in some capacity. So I really want to dive in deep on all of them and tell you who they are if you haven't really been following along too much to the Mets farm system. This is the time to do it. So we're going to get into all that. Before we do, though, today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Want the chance to win more money with less picks? Head to Sleeper, where you can win up to 100 times your money on just 2 or more fantasy baseball picks. Sleeper's now offering up to 100 times payout for up to 8 pick contests. You can choose as many as 8 players that you like and pick more or less on your favorite baseball stats like home runs, strikeouts, hits, and more. Get your picks right and you could win big. Built-in group chat functionality also makes Sleeper so much fun, because you can play with your friends and you can copy and paste what your group picks with a tap of a button. Entries can be made in 30 seconds or less. It's that easy. There's also safe and fast withdrawals. If you want to play at Sleeper, use promo code Locked On. You'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. The New York Mets play the Atlanta Braves 7:10 Eastern time tonight. Catch every pitch in the Mets hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Mets. Now, what the Mets have right now in Double-A is something that you don't see often, where there's 4 pitching prospects with a lot of promise in the same rotation. A lot of times, unless you got a great system like the Dodgers or some of these other ones where there's a lot of pitching to choose from, Tampa being another one at times. Typically, your minor league, Double-A or Triple-A affiliates might have a couple arms at each level that you're really excited about. But seriously, when you look at this Binghamton rotation, there are 4 arms. And at the beginning of the season, there was 2. It was Dominic Hamill and Mike Vassell. And Vassell been called up to Triple-A, pitched really well his last start. Every chance we might even see Vassell this season. But the 2 guys going into the year were Hamill and Vassell. Who was going to be the bigger riser? Who was going to put themselves in a position to knock on the door? And Dominic Hamill has not done that, but I'm still not out on him as a prospect. You look at the ERA of 4.53 this season, and it's not great. Okay, that doesn't jump out as, this is an elite pitching prospect. But last year, he showed a lot in his first full season. This was a 3rd-round pick in 2021. Right now, he's 24 years old. Last year, he pitched to a 3.84 ERA in low A, then got the call up to high A, where he pitched to a 2.59 ERA. And he struck out 11.96 batters per 9 last year. So that's almost 12. Really, really good. If you get anything over, 9 strikeouts per 9, if you're in the double digits, that shows great swing and miss stuff. And he was the Mets minor league pitcher of the year. He also threw 119 innings in his first professional season. So that's big time stuff. And I think if you look at where he's at now, he's sitting at 122 strikeouts and 95 1/3 innings pitched. So the strikeouts have still been there, and the innings are still there. You figure with 35 games left in the season after tonight, 34, probably has 6, 7 turns left in the rotation. If he was to average at least 5 innings and he's sitting at, 95, okay, he's looking at, a little bit more than he pitched last year. If he can average a little bit more than that, if he can get 6 innings per start over those, 6 or 7, he can be angling closer and closer to 140 innings. And I think if he gets anything past 135 and angles up towards that 140 mark, it's a successful season, kind of regardless of the ERA. Obviously, the ERA is important, and you hope that next year, when he's really pushing to make the big leagues, you would see improvement in that department. But the fact that he's still getting swing and miss is really important. He's still walking too many batters. That's something he has to iron out, but he's got a good fastball. He's got a good slider. He's working a changeup and a curveball in there. I think in some respects, Hamill will enter next season in a similar role as Jose Butto was this year. Now, Butto never pitched well in Syracuse and pretty much fell off the radar entirely when it comes to top prospects. And I'm not comparing their arsenal because Butto is a changeup, guy that's trying to get ground balls. Hamill still has the strikeouts that you can, put some hope towards, but it's more about the function on the roster. I think Hamill's a guy that could be depth for sure. There's an outside chance that he pushes to be part of the rotation at some point. I think honestly, what you want to see is going into next year, Mike Vassell and Dominic Hamill in the David Peterson, Tyler McGill roles. Are those two guys still going to be here? Likely, but I think McGill is getting to the point where I have not much faith in him moving forward. Peterson, I still have a little bit of hope in, but it might be as a reliever. He's got good enough stuff to hang in the pen. And at some points, it seems like he pitches better out of there. So I don't know. I think you could theoretically go into camp next season where the Mets add two, of the free agents to fill out that rotation. And you have sort of an open competition with Hamill, Vassell, Peterson, McGill, Lucchese's still sticking around, all these guys for that fifth spot. I don't know if the Mets are going to invest as much in really filling out their depth 1 through 5. I can see them more focusing 1 through 4 and hoping that some of these guys can fill that void at the back end of the rotation. And Hamill is a guy that, based on innings pitched at the highest levels of the minor leagues, he's going to be close. The other guy that is in that equation as far as next year is Christian Scott. Okay, Christian Scott, I already mentioned I would like the Mets to promote him this year. And the reason I say that is compared to the other pitchers we're going to talk about today, here's a guy that really commands the strike zone exceptionally well. In both of his stops this year, in high A and double A, he has kept the walk per 9 at about 1.5. So that's, every 2 starts, you're walking 3 batters, basically, right? If you were to go 18 innings, right? That's essentially what that's saying. Every 18 innings, you're walking 3. Okay. That's really good. And you see what he did last year. This is a 5th-round pick in 2021. Just turned 24 years old. Last year, first full season, he was 37 1/3 innings pitched in low A, had a 4.82 ERA, but the underlying stats were much better, had a lot of strikeouts. High A pitched to a 3.80 ERA and 21 1/3. This year, starts in high A, 2.28 ERA in 6 starts with 27 strikeouts, just 4 walks. That's in 23 2/3 innings pitched. And then 9 starts in double A. I mentioned this the other day, but pitching to a 3 ERA, 64 strikeouts, 8 walks, and 51 innings pitched. So on the year, he's right around 75 innings. Don't know how much they're going to jump him, but I just look at this guy and his last start out in particular, he's got really great stuff. And he struck out 11 4 2/3 the last time out, gave up 6 hits, a home run, 3 earned runs, 1 walk. It wasn't a great start, but 11 of the 14 outs he recorded, again, via the strikeout, and 8 of them were on fastballs where he just blew hitters away. Now, is that going to translate at the big league level? Not entirely. There was one instance where I saw the catcher set up outside for a fastball, and he ends up blowing it by the guy inside. He missed his spot completely, but the stuff was good enough that it got past them. He's got really good mechanics. He's got enough command that he doesn't fall behind in counts. That's why I think he can compete, because he has the type of fastball that can compete. Sits 95, and can touch a little bit higher than 96, 97. But he's the guy that I look at and say, man, he could kind of shock people with not only how much he's rose this season, because he was outside of the top 10. Probably some people might have him outside of the top 20. And now I think, everyone's going to have him, if not in the top 10 for the Mets system, fringe top 10. And I really think that the Mets pitching prospects now, it's some combination when you look at the top guys of Vassell, Scott, and then a guy we're going to talk about in the next segment, Blade Tidwell. I think those are the three best pitching prospects the Mets have right now. And Scott has just elevated himself with a really strong season. And when you see a guy take that jump from high A to double A in stride, it's showing you that the stuff is simply playing. So that's why I said, hey, call him up, because Mike Vassell is in AAA and there's been struggles. Now, his last start was great and he's further advanced and he's throwing more innings. And if they give him the audition in September, I completely get it. I just think Christian Scott's the guy that they could call up and you'd be like, wait, what's this guy doing? He's just throwing strikes. And, I feel like you put Christian Scott up in a game against the Washington Nationals and he might give you 6 strong innings. So that's not to say Vassell couldn't, but Vassell might, walk 4 guys in that game and give up the one hit to CJ Abrams that hurts him. You know what I'm saying? Whereas I feel like Scott's not going to beat himself right now with the way he is commanding his pitches. But again, when you go into next year, I think any and all of these guys that we're talking about have a chance to break camp depending on what the Mets do. I don't think that they add 3 starters in free agency again. I just don't. So if they add 2 and your rotation is Kodai Senga, Jose Quintana, and the 2 additions you make, that 5th spot is going to be very much up for grabs. And I think Vassell and Scott in particular have a pretty good chance at it. Hamill, outside shot at it. But I think all of them represent the depth that the Mets are going to try to count on going into next season. There's 2 more starters I want to talk about, though, that are part of this vaunted Binghamton Rumble Ponies rotation right now. There's the guy who started tonight and got knocked around, but he's 6'9". I don't know if I mentioned that. And then there's arguably the top pitching prospect in the Mets system, guy by the name of Blade Tidwell. We'll get to that in a minute. First, though, another word from our sponsors. The New York Mets play the Atlanta Braves 7:10 Eastern Time tonight. Catch every pitch of the Mets' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM, the SXM app. Just search Mets. Blade Tidwell. This is a guy that fans should be very, very excited about. 2nd-round pick last year. We're watching his first full season, and he has been very, very good. Started off in Brooklyn, made 17 starts, pitched to a 3.09 ERA, across 81 2/3 innings pitched with 112 strikeouts, which was a strikeout per 9 of 12.34. He's made 2 AA starts, 4 innings, 3 earned, first time out, then went 7 2/3 with 7 strikeouts on Wednesday night, allowing 2 earned runs. A great outing to see your top pitching prospect in AA, his 2nd start, pitching into the 8th inning. That's really impressive. And what he has that none of these other pitching prospects do outside of Scott, but even then it's not quite as lively, is the fastball. I mean, Blade Tidwell has really electric stuff and crazy movement on his pitches. He's really working with the breaking stuff. He was actually talking to the media today. It was good to kind of see his take on his season. And he basically said, Brooklyn to AA, the competition's a little bit better, but if you have good stuff, it's going to play anywhere. And he was sort of breaking down how the Mets have helped him as far as developing his pitches, and how, what he likes about the organization is they're not going to go out of their way to change things for you unless you sort of ask them to. They're going to let you pitch and with what feels right. But he's been able to tweak his pitches and get more sweep on his slider, He said his curve is more of a slurve now, and his changeup, he said, is more like a splitter. So what does that mean across the board with those pitches? It's a lot of movement. And, this is the type of guy that when you look at spin rate and all that type of stuff, he could be the top arm out of this group. So we'll see exactly, what his timeline proves to be. He's risen very quickly this year as far as being able to, get up to AA, where he's now going to be able to have, when it's all said and done, close to 10 starts, maybe not quite, maybe it's about 8 starts when it's all said and done in double. And then he'll start there next year, I'd imagine. And if things work out well, he's probably in AAA knocking on the door by midseason next year. And I think the realistic timeline is 2025, and I think he's the type of arm that you bring along slowly and really develop him. And you want Blade Tidwell to stand out in a big way, and you might even get into the service time game with him. Quite honestly, in 2025, who knows? But he is the pitching prospect that has the most frontline potential. I'd say of the group, maybe Christian Scott is next in that line, but I don't know if Christian Scott's ever going to become a frontline starter. I think he just becomes a really solid 3 or 4, which is huge. And Mike Vassal's in that same sort of camp, right? Guys that should be able to solidify the middle of your rotation. And if one of them pops more than expected, you get a frontline guy out of it, great. And Tidwell's the guy that I think probably has the best chance of being that frontline starter that you develop, that you look up in a couple of years and wow, he's a great number 2 to Kodai Senga potentially. But we'll just have to see. We'll have to see how the rest of this season goes and how he adjusts with a full year in AA next year, then potentially in triple. How quickly can he get moved along? He's also the youngest of the group. Tidwell is 22 years old, I believe. So you have time on your side there as well. The last guy is the guy that got rocked tonight. I was really hoping that Tyler Stewart would go out, have a great start, and we could marvel at what an absurd season he's having. He just dominated Brooklyn. 1.55 ERA in 14 starts. The guy is 6'9", and he isn't walking that many guys either. He's just been able to use his fastball and bully people. I think particularly from that size, that's tough. It's tough to get a read on him. It's so different when you have a pitcher coming from that height, that arm angle. It's going to make things hard on batters. And particularly in a level like low or high A, excuse me, but a level where you don't have the most experienced of hitters, it's going to lead to a really low ERA. And when he did it from 4 starts in AA, he was still having the same level of success. I really started to take notice. Like, all right, is Tyler Stewart like a guy's guy? Like, is he like gonna really be a dude in this farm system? And he's certainly garnering top prospect rankings now as far as in the system. He's now a top 20 guy, where he wasn't really anywhere close to that level when it comes to name recognition entering the year. But that's what pitching to a sub 2 ERA for most of the season will do for you. I still don't know what to make of Tyler Stewart. I still don't know what to make of the ERA, the 6'9" frame, how successful he has been. You see tonight, he gets knocked around like crazy, and I think that's just a guy living in the zone and a team that probably scattered him pretty good, and we're getting enough pitches with enough plate on them to get their barrel out in front and drive the baseball. And he had a rough outing, a rough go for Tyler Stewart, but what he did already was impressive to put himself on the map. And I don't think there's any rush here. I think you can really try to focus on developing him, because if you can figure out his secondaries and get them repeatable enough with that big frame, get the mechanics in line and everything to a point where he's got enough on a string where you think, all right, he's not going to get wild in the big leagues. He's not going to get knocked around, throwing the ball too much in the zone. He's commanding his pitches and being effective while throwing out of that slot, at that height that's going to make it tough on hitters. And he's locating from that position. Yeah, he can actually be special. And I think you have to see how he fares in AA the rest of the way through. I would imagine that he's maybe the furthest away from the big leagues, just based on trying to continue to help make him a pitcher. But there's a guy that could have played football or basketball either, so he's an athlete. Uh, I think the Mets have a gem here that they've uncovered. They just got to make sure they develop him properly. But that's really the name of the game with all these guys. And this is the crop that will tell you if the Mets have a pitching lab or not. If these guys, 2024, 2025, in that range, break through and all become, or at least 2 or 3 of them become quality big league starters. And obviously there's a ton of pitching they just drafted that'll filter into the system as well. You could see the Mets very soon actually have a real depth in their farm system when it comes to pitchers and particularly starters. And honestly, right now, they kind of do. And there's this misconception that there's not pitching in this farm system. Watch the Binghamton Rumble Ponies. You're going to see some pretty good pitching, except for tonight. Again, if you have MLB.tv, you can watch these games. And I encourage you to do so. It's a fun team. You got the 2 top prospects in the Mets farm system that you get a chance to look at day in, day out. You see Luis Angel Acuna stealing bases like crazy. You see Drew Gilbert and his incredible defense out in center field. That's the stuff that gets you excited about the future of the Mets, more so probably than watching Mark Vientos try to figure it out at the big league level right now. Obviously Alvarez has been great and it's awesome to watch him, but you get to see more of the future right now if you look at Binghamton, because currently in the big leagues, it's really just those 2 guys. It's Vientos and it's Alvarez. No knock on them, but this is a good time to watch minor league baseball in a season where the Mets are probably going to get knocked around by the Braves this weekend. But hey, if they don't, if the Mets prove that baseball's weird again, because baseball always can be weird, and they win a series against the Braves, I'll be back on Monday talking myself into some crazy stuff because just like all of you, I'm a fan. Anyway, that's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Rumble Ponies. Make sure you check out the next edition of Locked On Mets on Monday. Follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. And make sure if you want to catch every pitch of the Mets hometown broadcast this week, you do so with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Mets.